2 weeks before my 16th birthday, my parents told me to pack a bag. My sister was pregnant, and they needed my room for the baby. I was being sent away. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had never caused trouble. I got straight A's, worked a part-time job after school, and stayed out of drama. My sister, on the other hand, was 19, unemployed, and had just gotten pregnant by a guy she barely knew. Somehow, that made it my problem. There was no conversation about it. No, what do you think? Or how do you feel? My parents just told me I would be living with Aunt Linda 3 states away until things settled down. They made it sound like a temporary favor, but deep down I knew it wasn't. I tried to argue. I said it wasn't fair, that I'd worked hard to keep my life on track. My mom said I was being selfish. My dad told me, family helps family, as if giving up my home, my school, and my friends was a normal thing to expect from me. They didn't want to hear anything else. My sister didn't look guilty. She didn't even look embarrassed. She just sat on the couch scrolling on her phone while mom and dad explained why I had to go. My room, my posters, my bed, my desk where I studied, would be emptied out and turned into a nursery. I thought maybe there was a way to compromise. I could share with my sister for a while, or maybe they could turn the guest room into the baby's space. But every suggestion I made was shot down. They said the guest room was too small and my sister needed space, because she would be under stress with the pregnancy. Apparently, my stress didn't matter. The next day, my mom gave me 1 suitcase and told me to pack what I needed. 1 suitcase. Everything else would stay behind. I packed my clothes, a few books, and a small photo album I didn't want to lose. I didn't bother asking for my other things. They were already making plans to use them for the baby. On the morning I left, my dad drove me to the bus station. It was quiet the whole way. He didn't try to explain again, or even make small talk. When we got there, he handed me a ticket and said Aunt Linda would pick me up when I arrived. I stepped onto the bus with my single suitcase. As the bus pulled away, I looked out the window. My parents stood on the curb, waving. They didn't look sad, and they didn't look sorry. In that moment, I realized I was truly on my own. The home I had known for 16 years was gone, and my family had chosen my sister's comfort over my place in it. Aunt Linda's apartment was small, dark, and always smelled like cigarette smoke. The living room was crowded with old furniture and stacks of newspapers. My room wasn't really a room at all, just a corner in the den with a folding bed and a curtain for a wall. There was no privacy. I could hear every sound from the kitchen, the TV, and Aunt Linda's loud phone calls. She had rules for everything. No showers after 8 at night because water bills are high. No friends over. No snacks unless she said it was okay. I wasn't allowed to use the washing machine unless I had a full load, which meant sometimes I wore the same jeans 3 or 4 times in a row. School was different here, and not in a good way. I had to drop all the activities I loved. No debate team, no drama club, no part-time library job. The scholarship program I'd been working toward back home was now out of reach because I couldn't attend the required meetings. I tried to keep in touch with my old friends, but the distance made it hard. Their lives kept going while mine felt like it had been put on hold. Every once in a while, I'd check Facebook to see what was happening back home. That's when I saw the first picture of my old room. The walls were repainted a soft yellow, and there was a crib where my bed used to be. New curtains, new carpet, even a rocking chair by the window. My posters were gone. My desk was gone. It didn't look like my space anymore. It looked like I had never lived there. My parents didn't visit much. In fact, they came only once in the first 2 years. When they did, it was awkward. We didn't talk about me or how I was doing. They mostly talked about my sister and the baby, as if I was just another relative they saw at holidays. Phone calls were short and cold. They always ended with, "Well, take care," like they were talking to a neighbor, not their child. Aunt Linda reminded me almost daily how lucky I was to have a roof over my head. She'd say things like, "You know, I didn't have to take you in," or "You're eating my groceries." I kept my mouth shut, but every word stayed with me. I started picking up odd jobs after school, washing cars, babysitting for neighbors, delivering groceries. Every dollar went into a small envelope I kept hidden in my backpack. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Whenever Aunt Linda complained about me being a burden, I'd think about that envelope and the day I could finally leave. The resentment settled in slowly, like dust that never got cleaned away. I stopped expecting kindness from my family. I stopped hoping they'd change their minds. Instead, I focused on my plan to leave. By the time I was 17, I knew exactly what I was saving for. A bus ticket, a small deposit on a place of my own, and enough to buy groceries for him. I didn't know where I'd go yet, but I knew it would be anywhere but here. Every time I added a few more dollars to that envelope, I felt a little lighter, even if the air in Aunt Linda's apartment stayed thick with smoke. The day I turned 18, I packed my things and left Aunt Linda's without looking back. I had been counting the months, the weeks, and finally the days until I could go. I didn't have much, just the clothes I had bought secondhand, a few books, and the envelope of money I had been saving for years. I moved to a small city a few hours away. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I found a room to rent in an old house with creaky floors and thin walls. The rent was cheap, and I didn't mind the peeling paint or the leaky faucet in the bathroom. What mattered was that no one was standing over me, telling me what I could or couldn't do. Within a week, I got a job at a diner. It was nothing glamorous. Long hours, the smell of grease that stuck to my clothes, and customers who sometimes forgot their manners. But it paid my bills. I worked the morning shift, wiping down counters, refilling coffee cups, and memorizing the regulars' orders. In the evenings, I went to night classes at the community college. The walk there was long, but I didn't care. I was finally working towards something that was mine alone. I kept almost no contact with my family. Once in a while, I'd get a call on Christmas or my birthday, just enough for them to say they had checked in. Those conversations were short, polite, and empty. They never asked about my life or my plans. I never asked about theirs. It was easier that way. One night, after work, I was scrolling through my phone when I saw a post from someone back in my hometown. It was a picture of my sister with 2 small kids. I read the caption twice just to make sure I understood. The boyfriend she'd gotten pregnant by had left years ago, and now she had a second child by someone else. Both fathers were gone, and she was still living at home with our parents. I kept scrolling, but another post stopped me. This one was from my mother. She was complaining about how expensive everything had gotten, how the house was falling apart and needed work, and how it was time for the family to pull together. There was a hint of begging in her words, like she was hoping someone in the extended family would offer money. She even mentioned a plan to renovate the house, but said they couldn't afford it without help. I stared at that post for a long time. It didn't surprise me that they were in trouble. It didn't surprise me that my sister was still being taken care of while I had been pushed out. But reading those words made something shift inside me. I had been focused only on surviving, on keeping my head down and making a life for myself. But now I started thinking about more than just getting by. I started thinking about how one day the balance between us might change. One day, I could be in a position where they would need me more than I needed them. That thought stayed with me as I went to work the next morning, as I took orders and cleaned tables. They hadn't wanted me when I needed them. Someday, I told myself they would regret it. Over the next few years, I worked my way up from small jobs to something bigger. I started in an entry-level position at a real estate office, doing paperwork, answering phones, and learning how deals were made. I paid attention to everything: how agents talked to clients, how contracts were written, and how properties were bought and sold. Eventually, I took the tests, got my license, and began working as an agent myself. It wasn't easy at first. I worked long hours, showed houses in the rain, and dealt with clients who changed their minds over and over. But little by little, the sales came in. I closed my first big deal at 23, and it gave me the push I needed. From there, I kept growing my business, learning how to market myself, negotiate better, and handle more expensive property. By 25, I bought my first home, a small but beautiful place with white walls, a bright kitchen, and a yard where I could finally plant flowers. I also bought a car that didn't break down every few months. I traveled when I could, visiting cities I had only seen in pictures before. Every step felt like proof that I could build the life no one had given me. All this time, I kept an eye on my family from a distance. I didn't talk to them directly, but I saw things on Facebook or heard bits of gossip from old classmates. My parents were still helping my sister with her bills, babysitting her kids, and bailing her out whenever something went wrong. They talked about family responsibility, but it was clear that responsibility never included me. I saved screenshots of certain posts, especially the ones where my parents praised my sister for doing her best while ignoring everything I had accomplished. Along the way, I met someone who would change the way I thought about money. He was an older agent at my office who had been in the business for decades. He became my mentor, teaching me not just about real estate but about investing, setting up LLCs, and protecting my assets. He showed me how to make my money work for me, how to plan for the future, and how to keep control of what I earned. By the time I turned 26, I was in a place I never thought I'd reach so soon. My bills were covered. I had savings, investments, and more than one stream of income. I could decide what I wanted to do without asking anyone for help. I was free in a way I had dreamed about for years. But with that freedom came something else, a readiness to finally face the past. For years, I had avoided my family and stayed quiet. Now, I was in a position where I could choose how and when to deal with them, and I knew the time was coming. One evening, my phone rang, and I saw my parents' number on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. When I picked up, they didn't waste time with small talk. They said they were having trouble keeping up with the mortgage and were a few months behind. The word help came up more than once, but not once did they say they were sorry for anything in the past. I listened quietly, then made my voice sound warm. I told them I'd been thinking of visiting, and that it would be nice to see everyone again. They seemed pleased, probably because they thought this meant I'd be willing to hand over money. I didn't agree to anything, but I made it sound like I was open to talking more in person. A week later, I drove to my hometown for the first time in years. The streets looked smaller, the houses older. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed how worn the siding was and how the grass had grown tall in patches. The place looked tired. Inside, things had changed even more. My old room was still my sister's, but it had been remodeled again. The walls were a pale blue now, with new curtains and furniture arranged neatly around the space. I recognized my old desk in the corner, though it was covered with her things. Her children's toys were stacked where my bookshelf used to be. My bed had been replaced, but my childhood dresser was there, now holding her kids' clothes. It was like my past had been repainted and filled with someone else's life. Seeing it all hit me harder than I expected. Memories I had buried came rushing back. The day I left, the bus ride to Aunt Linda's, the smell of smoke in her apartment. For a moment, the same bitterness I had felt years ago came flooding back. But I kept my expression calm. I smiled and asked how everyone was doing. The kids ran around the living room, and my sister talked about how expensive everything had become. My parents mentioned bills more than once, dropping hints about the mortgage without saying it outright. I nodded along, acting as though I didn't notice the pattern. Over dinner, I started asking quiet questions, making it sound like casual conversation. I asked how work was going for my dad, how my mom was managing the house, and whether they were still thinking about renovations. My dad sighed and said his hours had been cut back. My mom said the roof leaked when it rained and the kitchen needed to be redone, but they didn't have the money. I didn't offer anything, not even advice. I just listened, letting them talk. The more they spoke, the clearer it became how deep their financial troubles were. They talked about rising costs, overdue bills, and how they had been dipping into their savings to help my sister when she couldn't make rent on her own. They didn't seem embarrassed to admit it. By the time I left that night, I had a much better picture of their situation. They were stretched thin, the house was in bad shape, and they were counting on me to rescue them. I said my goodbyes with a polite smile, hugged them at the door, and promised to stay in touch. Driving away, I kept my thoughts to myself. They had no idea I was already planning what I would do next. Not long after my visit, my parents called again. This time, they didn't try to hide how bad things were. The bank was threatening foreclosure on the house, and they were months behind on payments. Credit card debt had stacked up, and every bill seemed to be overdue. They sounded worn down, like they were holding on by a thread. In the middle of all this, my sister's situation wasn't any better. She still didn't have a job, and she was falling behind on her own bills. Most of the time, my parents were covering her expenses, which only made their own money problems worse. It was a cycle that didn't seem to end, and they were starting to see just how deep they were in trouble. One evening, while talking about their tough times, my mom mentioned an idea. She said it would be such a shame to lose the house because it had been in the family for so long. She wondered out loud if I might buy it to keep it in the family. My dad joined in, saying that if I took over the mortgage, they could still live there, and it wouldn't really change much, just the name on the paperwork. I stayed quiet for a moment, pretending to think it over. Then I told them I would be willing to help, but only if it was done the right way. The house would have to be put in my name completely. I explained that I didn't believe in mixing family and money without a clear agreement. If I bought it, it would be legally mine, and everything would be handled through proper channel. They didn't hesitate. My dad said, "Of course that's fair," and my mom quickly agreed. I could hear the relief in their voices. They thought this was their way out, that I would swoop in and fix everything while letting them keep living exactly as before. Inside, I knew they didn't see what I was planning. To them, I was just the daughter coming to the rescue after all these years. To me, it was a chance to take control of something they had taken from me a long time ago. We agreed to meet with a lawyer to start the process. I told them I'd take care of the legal fees and handle all the paperwork, making it sound like I was doing them a huge favor. They thanked me again and again, and I could almost hear the tension leaving their voices. What they didn't know was that once my name was on that deed, the house would no longer be theirs in any way. This time, I was the one setting the terms. And unlike when I was 16, I was the one with the power to decide who stayed and who. When I got home that night, I set the signed notices on my desk as a reminder that this wasn't just an idea anymore. It was happening. I knew the calls and messages would start soon, and I was right. The next morning, my phone lit up with texts from my parents, then from my sister. Some were angry, some were pleading, and some tried to guilt me into changing my mind. I didn't reply to any of them. Over the following days, they tried different tactics. My mom left voicemails saying she couldn't sleep because of the stress. My dad sent me links to apartments he claimed were too expensive. My sister posted vague complaints on social media about selfish people who turn on their own family. I ignored all of it. I focused on getting everything ready. I contacted a contractor, arranged for inspections, and made a plan for what I wanted done to the house once it was empty. The idea of walking through it without them there, seeing it as mine alone, kept me steady whenever I started feeling the weight of what I was doing. The extended family eventually heard pieces of the story, but because I had kept the sale quiet, they didn't know the whole truth. A few relatives called to get my side, but I didn't go into detail. I told them it was a legal matter and I had my reasons. That was enough to shut down most of the questions. As the weeks passed, I drove by the house a few times. From the street, nothing looked different, but I knew inside there was tension. They were packing, though slowly. It didn't matter. The deadline was firm, and I wasn't moving it. 90 days was generous compared to what they had given me when they took my room and sent me away. Back then, I had no say, no warning, and no choice. This time, I was the one in control, and they were the ones with nowhere to turn. When the day came, I arrived with the locksmith and the contractor. My parents and sister were still finishing loading the last boxes into a van. There were no long conversations, no goodbyes. I thanked them for handing over the keys and walked inside as they drove off. The house was quiet. My footsteps echoed in the empty room. I went to my old bedroom, now bare for the first time in years, and stood in the doorway. This space had once been taken from me without care. Now it was mine again, and so was every other room in the house. For the first time since I was 16, I felt like the balance had shifted completely. They had made their choices back then, and now I had made mine. It didn't take long for word to spread. Within days of handing over the notices, I started getting calls from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Some said they understood why I was doing it and that I was right to finally stand up for myself. Others called me selfish and cold, saying families should never treat each other this way. Everyone seemed to have an opinion, and most of them didn't know the full story. My sister was the loudest voice against me. She sent message after message about how unfair I was being, saying her kids didn't deserve to be homeless. She asked over and over, "Where will my kids go?" As if that would change my mind. I finally told her the same thing I got when I was 16, Aunt Linda's place. The silence on the other end of the line told me she didn't like hearing her own past thrown back at her. After that, the arguments got worse. She called crying, then shouting, sometimes both in the same conversation. My parents jumped in too, telling me I was tearing the family apart and that my actions would leave a permanent scar. I reminded them the scar had been there for a long time. They didn't like that answer either. The tension started spilling onto Facebook. My sister posted long, emotional messages about being betrayed by someone who should have been there for us, and my parents liked every one of them. Some relatives commented with sympathy, others hinted they knew there was more to the story. It became its own small drama for anyone in our extended family who liked gossip. The calls started coming from numbers I didn't recognize. Some were distant relatives, others were friends of my parents or people I hadn't spoken to since high school. A few tried to guilt me, saying I should think about the children. Others said I should at least let my parents stay. I didn't respond to any of it. At one point, my sister showed up at my office without warning. She stood in the lobby, demanding I come out and talk to her. I told the receptionist to let her know I was unavailable. Later, she sent a string of angry texts calling me a coward. I didn't reply. The noise around me kept growing, but I stayed where I was. I had given them 90 days, and nothing was going to change that. They could argue, cry, or try to turn people against me, but it wasn't going to undo years of being pushed aside. Every time my phone buzzed with another message, I thought about how quiet it would be once the house was empty. That thought kept me steady. I had made my decision, and I wasn't going back. Move-out day came faster than they expected. I arrived early with the locksmith and waited in my car until I saw the van pull into the driveway. It was old and dented, piled high with boxes and mismatched furniture. My parents stepped out without looking at me. My sister stayed by the van, her kids sitting inside. No one spoke at first. They moved slowly, carrying out the last of their things. A few boxes were stacked on the curb, and some old furniture was shoved into the back of the van. The house looked bare already. The pictures were gone from the walls, the rugs rolled up, the shelves empty. Even the smell of the place felt different, like it was already letting go of them. When the last box was loaded, my dad handed me the keys. His face was tight, like he was holding in everything he wanted to say. My mom gave me one quick glance, and then looked away. My sister muttered something under her breath, but I didn't ask her to repeat it. I nodded, thanked them for giving back the keys, and walked straight to the door. The locksmith followed me inside. Within minutes, the locks were changed, and the new keys were in my pocket. The sound of the old deadbolt being removed felt final, like a door closing on more than just the house. Once they drove away, I walked from room to room. The place felt empty in a way I hadn't seen since I was a teenager. My old bedroom was stripped down to bare walls and a worn-out carpet. The living room had nothing but dust in the corners where furniture had been. The kitchen cabinets were nearly empty, just a few dishes left behind. Every trace of them was gone, and for the first time, it truly felt like mine. I didn't waste time. The next day, I met with the contractor to start the renovations. The walls would be painted fresh, the floors replaced, the roof fixed, and the kitchen updated into something bright and open. My old room would become a space I actually wanted to walk into, not a reminder of what I had lost. Weeks later, as the work continued, I saw my vision starting to take shape. The peeling paint disappeared, the creaky floors were gone, and sunlight filled the room. Piece by piece, the house was turning into exactly what I wanted, a place I could call my dream home. Every time I stepped through the new front door, I remembered the day I had been told to leave at 16. That memory no longer hurt. Now, the house stood as proof that I had taken back what was mine and shaped it into something better than it had ever been. The renovations were finished, and the house felt completely new. Fresh paint, smooth floors, and sunlight in every room. It didn't feel like the place I had been forced to leave years ago. It felt like something I had built for myself. I decided to have a small housewarming, just a few close friends, the people who had been there for me without asking for anything in return. I cooked a little, set out drinks, and opened the doors to let them see the home I had turned this place into. They laughed in the kitchen, admired the changes, and filled the rooms with warmth that had nothing to do with blood ties. As I moved through the house that night, I caught myself pausing in certain spots. The corner of the living room where I used to sit as a kid, the hallway I had walked down when I was told to pack my things, the bedroom that had been taken from me. Those memories were still there, but they didn't feel heavy anymore. The rooms were mine now, and so was my life. We sat on the back porch as the evening went on, talking about work, travel, and plans for the future. No one asked me for money. No one made me feel like I owed them something. Every person there wanted me around simply because they liked me, not because they could get something. That difference meant more than I could explain. Later, when the last guest left and the house was quiet again, I walked through each room one more time. The space felt calm, settled. I thought about my parents and my sister, about everything that had led to this moment. I didn't forgive them, and I didn't want to. Forgiveness would mean trying to understand choices I never agreed with. I didn't need to understand. I didn't need anything from them. This house wasn't just about getting my room back. It was about taking control of my life, about proving to myself that I could build something stable and safe without their help. I had turned a place of loss into a place of strength. Standing in the doorway of my bedroom, I realized they had given me something after all, though not in the way they intended. They had shown me exactly what their version of family looked like. I had simply chosen another definition, one built on trust, respect, and the people who actually cared to be here. I closed the door, feeling no need to look back. So, what do you think? Did she do the right thing by taking back the house and cutting her family out for good, or should she have given them another shot? I'd really like to hear your take on it in the comments. And if you enjoy stories about betrayal, revenge, and turning the tables, make sure you follow and stick around. You won't want to miss the next one.